Ever drive by those roadwork ahead signs and wonder, what are they really doing down there?
Yeah, it's like a whole hidden world, isn't it?
Totally. So today, we're going underground, taking a deep dive into urban tunneling.
Really digging deep, huh?
You know it. And with all the amazing technology involved, it's way more than just digging a hole.
That's right. It's a delicate dance of engineering and surprisingly human factors.
Exactly. And we're zeroing in on a type of project that's more relevant than ever. Light rail transit systems, LRTs.
Right, those sleek trains are popping up everywhere. And in Canada, LRT construction is absolutely booming.
For sure. Like the Renew Top 100 list shows 11 active LRT projects just this year. So we're talking serious digging here.
Absolutely. Which brings us to some fascinating research.
Yeah, we're diving into a 2024 conference paper called From Design to Delivery, Navigating the Challenges of Urban Tunneling Instrumentation and Monitoring.
Catchy title.
Right. It's by the folks at GPM Consultants, and these are the engineers, like literally in the tunnels making these projects happen.
And what's so interesting about their research is the focus on what they call instrumentation and monitoring, or I&M.
Okay, so it's kind of like the behind-the-scenes stuff, making sure those tunnels are built safe and don't, cause any surprises up above.
Exactly. Think about it. You're tunneling through layers of history, old infrastructure, a maze of utility lines.
Right. It's not like cities are built on empty fields.
Precisely. And I&M is how engineers make sure those tunnels are sound and the surrounding ground stays stable.
So instead of just going off blueprints, they're using tech to keep tabs on things in real time.
That's it. Imagine sensors throughout the tunnel, constantly measuring things like pressure, movement, even tiny shifts in the soil.
Whoa, so it's like a Fitbit?
Exactly, a Fitbit for the Earth. All that data gets beamed back to engineers instantly.
Wow, so they're always in the know, even if something seems a bit off.
You got it. And this is where the Internet of Things, the IoT, comes into play.
The IoT. Always got to love a good acronym.
Right. All those sensors we talked about, they're connected, constantly talking to each other and sending information back to a central hub.
So they're basically one step ahead. I bet that makes a world of difference in projects this big, right?
It's crucial. Imagine catching a potential issue early on, maybe a slight shift in the soil.
Yeah, what happens then?
They can adjust the tunneling path, reinforce an area. We're talking potentially saving millions in repairs,
Right.
Not to mention preventing accidents.
Okay, so it sounds like I&M, powered by this IoT, is like the ultimate safety net for these projects.
It's pretty remarkable, but, and this is where it gets really interesting, the paper doesn't shy away from the fact that things can still go wrong.
Oh, there's always a but, isn't there?
Right. And often the culprit isn't the technology failing, but the human element.
What, you mean like someone forgot to plug something in?
Sometimes it's that simple, but it's also things like miscommunication, assumptions, forgetting to loop another team in.
The classic human error.
Exactly. And those oversights can snowball into major issues on a project this complex.
So it's a good reminder that even with all this incredible tech at our fingertips, we got to remember the human side of things.
Absolutely. And the paper really highlights that with some, well, let's just call them cautionary tales.
Ooh, I love a good cautionary tale. Give me an example. So what kind of cautionary tales are we talking about?
Well, they talk about this thing they call the case of the shifting schedule. Really shows how even a small miscommunication can throw a wrench in the works.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Set the scene for me.
So picture this, right? You've got a tunneling project underway, everything's moving along.
Got it.
And then, bam, they hit a snag, unexpected soil conditions. Happens more often than you think.
Oh, bad.
Yeah, and in this case, they had to build new head walls, those reinforced concrete support.
Right, to keep everything from caving in.
Exactly. But, and here's the kicker, the construction team building these head walls, they weren't totally in sync with the monitoring team.
Oh, that doesn't sound good.
Yeah, so they end up building these head walls, which is the right move, but they accidentally damage some of the monitoring equipment already in place.
Oh, no. Talk about adding insult to injury.
Right. And to make matters worse, those new head walls, they created obstructions, blocked the line of sight for some of the automated monitoring systems.
You mean those laser-based things?
The automated total stations, exactly. Yeah. They need a clear line of sight to function.
So basically the project's on hold until they fix the equipment and figure out a workaround.
Pretty much. And remember those tunnel boring machines? They can't just keep going blindly. They need the all clear from the monitoring team. So this little hiccup, It throws off the whole timeline, the budget, everything.
It's like a domino effect.
Exactly. And it all could have been avoided with like a quick phone call, you know?
Sometimes it's the simplest things. Just a little heads up like, hey, we're about to build some head walls over here. You might want to, move your stuff.
Right. It just highlights how important communication is on these projects. Everyone needs to be on the same page, especially when you've got so many moving parts.
For sure. Okay, well, speaking of things that can throw a project off track, you mentioned something about a snowstorm. That feels pretty relatable, especially for us Canadians.
Ah, yes. The snowstorm saga. A classic tale of man versus nature, but with a technological twist.
You've got to tell me more. How does a snowstorm mess with a high-tech tunneling project?
Well, remember those prisms we talked about? The ones that act like mirrors for the automated total stations?
Right, reflecting the laser beams back to the monitoring station.
Exactly. Well, imagine a heavy snowfall. What happens?
Let me guess. The prisms get covered in snow.
Bingo! No reflection, no data.
You're kidding? All that fancy tech, and they didn't account for a little snow.
Hey, it happens. It's easy to overlook the obvious sometimes. And I'm guessing sending someone out to clear those prisms in the middle of a blizzard wasn't really an option.
Yeah, probably not the safest idea. So what's the lesson here? Should we just avoid tunneling in the winter altogether?
Well, that's not very practical, is it? But it does emphasize the importance of contingency planning. You got to think ahead, anticipate those disruptions. What's the backup plan if your primary monitoring system goes down? Could be a snowstorm, a power outage, who knows?
So always have a plan B.
Exactly. What's the alternative data source? Can you access the system remotely if the site's inaccessible? Asking these what-if questions can save you a lot of headaches down the line.
Makes sense. Always be prepared. All right, you mentioned one more story, something about a utility surprise.
Ah, yes. This one really drives home the importance of stakeholder engagement.
Stakeholder engagement. In this context, who are we talking about? Besides the engineers, obviously.
We're talking about everyone. Anyone who might be affected by the project or whose work might impact the project. City officials, utility companies, the folks who manage those underground gas lines, water pipes, everything.
Like a whole other world down there.
Right. And forgetting to loop someone in can have some, shall we say, unintended consequences.
Okay, so communication is key. These stories are making me realize that these projects are as much about managing people and expectations as they are about the actual engineering. It's true though, isn't it? We get so caught up in the wow, look at that massive tunnel, that we forget about all the behind-the-scenes stuff that makes it possible.
It's easy to overlook, right? But it's, like you said, these projects, they're about people as much as they are about engineering.
Totally. So how do we make sure these projects are successful, not just, getting the tunnel built, but doing it safely and efficiently? What's the secret sauce?
Well, I think it boils down to a few key things. First off, collaboration. And not just, oh yeah, we'll collaborate, but really baking it into the project from day one.
Right, not just checking a box.
Exactly. Break down those silos, get the engineers talking to the contractors, the monitoring team, everyone. Even bring in those outside stakeholders, the city, the utility companies.
Everyone's got to be on the same page right from the start.
100%. And that ties into the second point, which is planning. And I don't just mean schedules and budgets, although those are obviously important.
Of course, got to keep things on track.
Right. But it's more than that. It's about really thinking through potential risks, what could go wrong, and then, most importantly, having a backup plan for each of those what-if scenarios.
Like we were saying with the snowstorm. Things happen, so you got to be ready.
Exactly. So you have your primary monitoring system, great. But what if it goes down? What's plan B? Is there an alternative way to collect that data? Can you access things remotely if the site's inaccessible?
Those are good questions.
Right. Thinking through all of that beforehand, that's what sets a project up for success. And again, it comes back to communication. Everyone needs to be aware of the plan, who's responsible for what.
Right, so when something unexpected happens, it's not chaos. It's like, okay, we have a procedure for this.
Exactly. Proactive communication, not reactive scrambling.
Love that. Okay, so collaboration, planning, communication, all these things are crucial to keep these complex projects on track. Anything else we should be thinking about?
Well, there's one more thing that really struck me from the paper. They mention that the cost of instrumentation and monitoring, it's often a pretty small percentage of the overall project budget.
Really? That's surprising to me, considering how important it seems to be.
Right. And it makes you wonder, are we investing enough in this behind-the-scenes work? these projects are only getting more complex, more crucial to how our cities function.
It's true. We rely on this infrastructure more and more.
Exactly. So maybe it's time to rethink those priorities. Sure, the big engineering feats are impressive, but we can't forget about the crucial, even if it's unseen, work of I&M.
It's the foundation, right? All those sensors, all that data. It's what keeps things running smoothly, keeps people safe.
Absolutely.
It's definitely something to think about the next time you're like zipping through a tunnel on your way to work, right? There's a whole lot happening behind those concrete walls.
A hidden world that makes our modern lives possible.
Totally. Well, that was fascinating. Thanks for taking us deep underground today.
Anytime.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.